Hello everyone. I hope I'm audible, loud and clear. So I'm that person, guys, who's sort of stopping you and also very, strongly standing between the very nicely organized lunch by indiantelevision.com. So the next 15 minutes, we shall just sail through together. Coming back to the topic of the discussion that I'm taking you guys through is hindsight and insight. So do not be expect heavy weighted data and numbers really flowing through the presentation. I have kept it very light. Coming to introductions, so getting past the introductions first of all, taking the liberty and the virtue of the kind of reactions I will get from the introduction already done by the 50% of the audience, I would actually want to skip saying that my name is Esha Nagar and I'm a researcher. But very carefully so, and very proudly so, we are in the business of research, and I lead NEPA's business for India in consumer science. Having said that, let's talk about the numbers that we have been listening in the sessions prior to this, and I think the sessions have done a beautiful job of context setting of the entire point that I'm trying to strike by hindsight and insight. We are talking about 40 plus OTT players and growing. The kind of choices that the consumer and the viewer has today is insane. We are also talking that the Indian market is on the verge of doubling up its viewer base with 250 million viewer base by 2020. Some other numbers, if you talk about billions and millions, the content industry right now is just exploding with the kind of factoids which can be displayed in any presentation like this. The last one being, we're talking about 88 billion minutes of content being generated by 2022 per month. All this has led to more content, more viewers, more choices, but the most important, it has also led us to go into a situation of more. Thus, together, everyone is trying to address more. And this more has led to a lot of clutter. It has also led to a person to think that, what is the kind of content that will really resonate? What is the kind of script that will really work? Because in a normal day of a content viewer, it's very important for us to find that white space or a window to get our script or content in. We are talking about clutter, we are talking about ROI. Just very beautifully so in the panel discussion we just had, I was talking outside about whether it should be marketing and testing leading into scripts or it should be the other way around, which is letting the creative fluidity flow and then talking about the viewer resonance. Because this balance, which the slide behind me is talking about, is very important. The delicate balance between the creative fluidity and the viewer resonance is going to be a big question for the content ecosystem. Let's talk about the super viewer. Majority of you who would be familiar with the FMCG way of things, we have been talking about super consumer for a lot many years. Now is the making of a super viewer. When we are talking about why would some scripts flourish, why would some scripts really evaporate and not be noticed, it's actually because the content is being driven by two very important faces of the viewer. The first one being the behavioral part of it, which is the brand, which is my choices in terms of category, which also means how important or relevant is content to me today. Because not necessarily the kind of choices that we are talking about has some bit of importance in a normal business as usual or a day as usual in the life of a viewer. The second most important thing that we talk about in the consumer science parlance is psychographics. We are talking about my becoming, which is a person who would have migrated, say from a small town to Mumbai versus a Mumbaiker, which is a metro. If you just have to talk about the demographics, my content choices will be absolutely different. We also are talking about persona, the type of person that I am, the socio-cultural lifestyle attitudes and the things that I normally believe. It's not that जब मुझे देखना होता है कि मैं क्या content देखूं, I have this process and I will actually go by this flowchart, but at a subconscious level, these things matter because these are the things which are instigating my consideration set for the kind of content that I watch. In the session prior to mine, we were also talking about a day in the life of a consumer or a viewer. So I'll use the example, something that really works beautifully well when it comes to striking a balance in terms of how a viewer is exposed to different kind of stimuli. We will go through the journey a day as usual in the life of a normal average viewer. So I'm just trying to simplify the process of demographics or segmentation. Meet Smita Prabhakaran, 31 years old, female, lives in a 2 BHK in Coimbatore. Also has a lovely husband and a beautiful daughter. So you will see the progression of how the day is going on and also the content inclusions that Smita is really making in a very busy day of hers. We are at the 7 a.m. slot. The kids are leaving for school and also not really interested in dressing up or also interested in the whole process of having breakfast. What happens here? The kid is watching Paw Patrol and also the mother is trying to get her ready for school. We go into the second slot. Before going into the second slot, actually, Smita is also thinking about the kind of binge she did on Kalyanam season 1 a night before, which is what is also going into her mind, and that's also making her a little busy. Then we enter the lunch or the pre-lunch scene, which is largely the home chores, no time for content. She's a very busy homemaker, a very busy mom. We go into the lunch and me time, where she has exactly 30 minutes to fit in content is right here. Now there are 2 shows she really wants to catch up on, and we would believe that she is trying to catch up whatever she missed on television, but here she will just try to skip those episodes and try to get a gist of whatever she missed on as a catch up. What we also call very beautifully as snacking. Now comes the time to socialize. She's going for a kitty party, meeting some of her friends who are talking about Jamtara, a Hindi show that they watched. Now we're talking about South. They are talking about Jamtara, which is something that really fascinated. So what she does is that she adds on Jamtara in her watching list, which is something that she will watch once she goes back. We finally go into the last stage, which is the family time. She comes back. This is the time when she really wants to talk to her husband and also wants to catch up with her daughter who's back from her tuitions. And this is where once they are going and calling it a day, both husband and wife are glued onto the phones, and she prefers watching Jamtara and not really catch up upon Kalyanam season 2. That, however, which we would really feel that the husband's repertoire would be Hollywood movies, it was actually Kalyanam, which is a rom-com. So this was just an example of a person, a normal day, how the person is thinking about content. It's not really thought through, it's just about fitting in entertainment at the different voids wherever she was free. Now what we'll do is, because I love numbers, that's the business that we are in, we'll look at how some of the myths were broken in terms of this life cycle or the time stage that we talked about. We talked to 1600 plus consumers in an exercise to understand the content atlas scene and how people are consuming content and what are the things that they are liking in terms of sentiment. What we found out, and I'll keep on drawing parallels from the timeline that we just saw earlier, we talked about binge, where Smita was really cribbing about why did she binge Kalyanam. So on binge, we have seen that 3 out of 5 are binging. We are talking about people who are watching web series and originals. But loyalty beyond the first season is tough to garner. Today, the consumer wants to know the 10 themes that I would really want to pick and see. This is new, I'll watch it. The second theme is quite different, I'll watch it. But will the stickiness throughout the show, the number of minutes that we are talking? Perhaps not. Also, one point very nicely mentioned there was a time when actors were the pulling ground for sticking to a show. That has reduced. We are talking only 20% of the people who would really watch a content piece because of a particular actor or actress sitting in there. We also saw South viewers and Jamtara and the conversations around it. Hindi is the second most language. It could also be distribution of content, but it's not that language is a barrier. We have been talking hyper-personalization, we have been talking regional, but at the heart of it, the digital content is breathing story and the plot line, and not really the language or the characters. This brings us to a very favorite word called FOMO, the millennials and Gen Z. This is something that really puts us up. We know that we love to discuss during our breaks, what did we snack upon a day prior? The choice of adding Jamtara in the watching list and also very beautifully skipping over Kalyanam season 2 was on the basis of peer pressure or FOMO. 50% of the people who we would really call like say original style, someone who really loves watching web series, are watching it due to FOMO or peer pressure. The last piece, we saw a beautiful thing happening, which is we saw her watching Jamtara and we watched the husband watching the rom-com. So we are looking at a gender neutral content ecosystem where 45% of females whom we interviewed said that they really like watching dark themes and not the stereotypical content that we would assume them to watch. 53% of the men that we interviewed said that they would love to catch up on a romance or a drama series, not really that the sacred games and the likes is something that would be my consideration set. So thus we are breaking some myths with the individual screen and the mobile first ecosystem that we are getting into. So thus, that brings me to a very important piece, which is when it comes to really identifying how to get Smita and many of them to getting hooked onto content, it's important to go beyond gut plus, which is data and research might not be essential throughout the content life stage, but there are different stages at which it can be carefully and very nicely fitted in with the creative process, which can just validate, there's a beautiful quote that goes by that some information is better than no information when making decisions, which is backed by data. And in the words of Jim, it's right there, if we have data, let's look at data. If we all have is an opinion, let's go with mine. So the idea is to really cut it through between the creative conduct and the research conduct. Some of the examples are at the content development stage, which is the pre-launch, post that is the pre-launch support stage, also the in-market stage, which is the trailers or which is the kind of, the whatever stimuli that we are using in terms of marketing the content. There is a careful correlation when we study the past and the current choices of the consumer, and fairly predictable as we are evolving. And given that choices are many, it definitely calls for a scientific process to eliminate right at the idea stage what is going to work, what is not going to work. So that's actually about it. I hope that it was not too research heavy, and the comparison between the research and the content part of it is something that I was able to bring in for the audience. We have the NEPA team around, and if you have any questions and we would want to know what's really brewing up in the content lab in terms of testing, that would be it. I have been very nicely asked by the organizers to take only 2 questions at best. Okay, so the first one is, what are the trends seen for the UGC content? So this one is tricky, because that is one space in which you really can't command a lot of trends or research. UGC is the user-generated content that we're talking. We had a beautiful session at, on TikTok. So here I wouldn't really say that there are trends. We are still at the nascent stages. We're talking about scripted content, and we're talking about the originals which have engineering already done. But for UGC, it's not that the industry is ready with the trends yet. It's too early to say. Yeah, but one point there definitely is that keeping it raw and relevant is what is working, which is relatability and from the heartland. So that is definitely what is working in UGC. The second question, does that mean research is necessary for everything in the creative process? No, the research is not really necessary. We are not talking about have research at every process of right choosing from the actor to the story and the plot line and the twist that will happen for the different series that we're talking about. We are just saying that bring it in where it's necessary and where the validation can happen. To just completely go gut, it's better to go a little gut plus when it comes to different stages rather than completely going into a territory that we do not know about. So that was it, guys. Thank you so much. Please bring in any questions that are there, maybe offline.